but the past 9 months or so, I started doing a lot of drawing and painting, and I feel like I have learned so much. So today I just wanted to share a few techniques, how I paint sculptures, how I paint and draw, and so on. I'm gonna start with how I use the painting materials. Like what I'm doing right here is not really relevant. This is what I am gonna be painting. As you can see by the fork, I'm not really a gardener. And you definitely don't need to draw from life. I just really like doing it because I can't do it very often. So anyway, I think this first step when I'm making the outline, I actually like using my underglaze pencils here. By the way, if you want to buy these or any of the materials that I use in this video, I am gonna put a link down to my Amazon storefront. And I only really have two materials there that I use all the time, and that is these underglaze pencils and Amaco's velvet underglazes. Work so well separately and they work so well in combination. I will say they are semi-translucent, and that is actually why I like to draw the outline with the underglaze pencils. You don't have to, you can definitely use a graphite pen. I don't know how much of a difference this make. Sometimes, and it depends a little bit, naturally how the painting feels as I go along, but sometimes I like to leave the layers a little bit more translucent, not on the tiles, but specifically when I work with porcelain, because porcelain, that beautiful bony color kind of just works really well with something that's translucent, I think. In those cases, it just kind of confuses me to see the graphite underlines. Like I like seeing the underglaze underlines because they give color and they give me a better indication of how things will actually look. So enough about that. When it comes to these painting colors, since they are semi-translucent, they can work with a lot of different techniques. I like to start with these very watered down layered and go layer after layer after layer, and that takes a little bit longer time. And then as I go, I sort of add more opaqueness. And it's very, very easy to do that. When I talk about opaque layers, I just talk about layers that I haven't watered down, or simply layers that I've watered down a lot less than the initial layers that you saw that were more translucent. And honestly, these Amaco underglazes just have such an incredible velvety, silky feeling to them, and I love them so much. Underglazes, as many of you people know, are essentially like clay with pigments and some other binders in them so that they can be fired on top of your ceramics. They do not move at all as much as the glazes do. I would say honestly that they probably don't really move at all as long as you don't take glaze. When they do move, is because you have glaze on top, like a clear glaze that grabs them, and that's a whole nother thing that I will talk a little bit more about in the end of this video. They do change color a little bit, but not a lot. They do get a little bit more saturated. One thing that I would look out for, and this is like not only Amaco's underglaze, I think this is every single underglaze that I have. I always notice that there's like one color or two that will have way more saturation comparatively after fire than before. So I would maybe keep that in mind, just in the back of your mind, that like you will figure them out as you go and they will become more and more optimal, even though I do think that the results right away are going to be nice because it's subtle, but sometimes depending on how you work, like I remember like one time I was doing this like black cat, and the black just like got so much more saturated and dark than everything else, and it just overtook the whole thing and it became a muddy mess. Don't happen so much for me with a lighter color, but that's just something to maybe keep in mind. As you see here, I am just layering these a bunch. I just love feel the feeling of the layering, and I always feel like they do shine through in a specific way when you work like this. There's a lot of people that will just make 1, 2, 3 layers and that's done, and that's probably way quicker, but this is how I work, and this was the result of this tile. On to the next piece that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to go a little bit heavier with the drawing materials. This time I'm not only using them for outlines, I am also using them to actually build texture and create fur. I am way more confident with the pencils than I am with the brush. I have extremely shaky hands, and I don't know if anyone can relate to this, but I cannot with a brush. You can't push down hard enough, I feel like. So I'm always like shaking when I'm doing little details and stuff like that. But the pencils, I can really push down, and that allows me to stabilize my hands. And that's probably why I always have preferred these as well, drawing materials in general. With that said, it's not only like a practical function that I like about these pencils. They do create a very specific look, and like I said, especially I do love the fur, and they will have a little bit of a like a rougher, scratchier appearance to them. And oh, as always, like again, you can go very loose and hard, and I don't know, it's just different, and I love it for what it is. And this is like my staple technique. As you saw here in the beginning, I kind of start similarly to the way that I did with the tile painting, where I start with a few very watered down layers just to give a little bit tone, and they are gonna totally shine through the pencils. I prefer the combinations of underglaze paints together with the pencils better than the pencils alone. And the reason for this is that as much as I love the pencils, when you draw with them and you use glaze on top, they are always going to have a little bit of bleed. Sort of like how you would use a watercolor pencils and how it looks like a regular pencil lines, but then you put water on it and it sort of bleeds out. That is what these pencils do. However, when you use them on top of the watered down, and this is very important because you cannot go opaque. Like I would not be able to draw on the tile that I just made because it would completely scratch up the whole surface. So this is definitely a little bit of technique that I have perfected over time and that you need to perfect as well. But you want to go with a very, very thin watered down layer, but that will actually keep the pencil in place. And you will see once this is glazed later on that it makes these illustrations stay on really well. And oh my God, I was so happy with this particular mug. This mug, by the way, is going to my niece, so I was excited for that. Lastly, I do want to quickly show you how I use these underglaze paints to paint textured sculptures as well. That's what I've been doing the longest. I've done way more sculptures than I have done anything else. And essentially, like you can see here, that this is a trifecta of using very watered down underglaze paints to begin with on all three of these works. The sculptures, I do want the shape and the texture of the sculpture to shine, so I definitely don't want to fill it in. Like if I would take underglaze straight out of the bottle without watering it down, it would really sort of eat up a lot of that texture. I'm just looking for a little bit of tone and enhancement, and yeah, the only notes to take about texture sculptures is to add a lot of water, probably 80% water to the color, and then you don't need to do that much more. So I would like to end this video with some notes on what's arguably the most important to get good results with these pencils, and that is the glazing. I brush on the glaze on sculpture straight after painting it. The reason for that is that the glaze will always make the colors move a little bit, which is usually really, really nice with the sculptures. I love that feeling on the sculptures. However, when it comes to illustrative work, like the cast that I drew here or the painting that you saw on the tile in the beginning, I want them to really stick and not move around and bleed and get ruined, which has happened so many times. So the way that I have figured out how to do this, there are essentially three options. One of them is not adding any clear glaze on top of them at all. That will make them stick the absolute best. But I also understand that when it comes to things that are functional, that you probably want that protection a lot of times. I usually do. So the second best thing that I do, where I feel like I can control the layers the most and where it doesn't get too thick, which it can easily be when I'm just dipping it, is to do what I'm doing here, which is airbrushing it on. And I do that just a very thin coat. I can usually see the outlines. And here are some results of pieces that I've applied this technique to. Unfortunately, the pieces that I made in this videos are still waiting to come up from the kiln, so I'm probably going to make a short or something. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and that it was helpful.